Iowa's 2011 cold case was finally solved when an arrest shocked the entire community. On April 8, 2011, 27-year-old Ashley Oakland was hosting an open house in West Des Moines when her bright future was cut short by a single gunshot. No robbery, no struggle, no witnesses, just a young woman's life stolen in broad daylight while neighbors quietly went about their daily routines. For 13 long years, her family refused to give up hope while detectives chased shadows and leads that led nowhere. The case file gathered dust until new technology breathed life into forgotten evidence. When officers finally arrested Bobby Jack Betts in April 2024, the community that thought they knew everyone discovered they had been living alongside a killer all along. But what really happened in that empty house on that spring afternoon, and how did one man's deadly secret stay buried for more than a decade? Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time right now. The morning sun painted golden squares across the hardwood floors of the model home. Ashley Oakland smoothed her blazer and checked her watch. 9:30. The open house would start in 30 minutes. She walked through each empty room one final time, her heels clicking against the polished floors. This was her favorite part of the job, taking empty spaces and helping families imagine their future within these walls. Ashley could already picture children running down the hallway, family dinners in the kitchen, Christmas mornings in the living room. She pulled out her phone and called her coworker. "Hey, it's me, just getting everything ready here. The weather's perfect, so I'm hoping for good traffic today." She laughed at something her friend said. "Yeah, I know. Another Saturday at work while normal people sleep in." Ashley unlocked the front door and propped it open with a brick. The spring breeze carried the scent of blooming trees through the new development. She placed the guest book on the kitchen counter and arranged her business cards in a neat stack. At 10 o'clock sharp, she heard footsteps on the front porch. A young couple appeared in the doorway, holding hands and looking nervous. First-time buyers, Ashley could tell immediately. "Welcome," she said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Ashley. Come on in and make yourselves at home." For the next few hours, she guided families through the house. She answered questions about school districts and property taxes. She watched children press their faces against windows and parents exchange meaningful glances in the master bedroom. By 4 o'clock, the traffic had slowed. Ashley straightened up the guest book and gathered scattered flyers. She was looking forward to getting home and reviewing her notes. Two families had seemed genuinely interested. At 4:47, Mrs. Henderson walked her dog past the model home. The front door stood wide open, which seemed odd for this time of day. She'd driven past earlier and seen cars in the driveway, but now the place looked deserted. "Hello?" she called out, stepping onto the porch. "Everything okay in there?" Silence. Mrs. Henderson's dog whined and pulled at the leash, trying to get away from the house. Something felt wrong. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. "I think something's happened at the open house on Maple Drive," she told the dispatcher. "The door's open but nobody's answering." The operator kept her on the line while she cautiously stepped inside. "Ma'am, please don't go any further into the house," the voice crackled through her phone. But Mrs. Henderson had already seen her. Ashley lay motionless on the living room floor, a dark pool spreading beneath her head. Mrs. Henderson screamed and stumbled backward, her dog barking frantically. Within minutes, sirens wailed through the quiet neighborhood. Paramedics rushed inside while police officers secured the crime scene. Detective Martinez arrived as they were loading Ashley into the ambulance. "Is she alive?" he asked. The paramedic replied, "Single gunshot wound to the head. We need to move fast." Detective Martinez watched the ambulance disappear around the corner, its lights fading into the afternoon haze. He turned back to the house. The front door still stood open. Guest books still sat on the kitchen counter. Business cards still arranged in perfect stacks. But Ashley Oakland would never sell another house. The call came at 6:15. Ashley had died at the hospital without regaining consciousness. Detective Martinez closed his notebook and looked around the empty house one more time. Somewhere in these rooms lay the answer to who had done this and why. Ashley's co-workers gathered at the real estate office early Sunday morning. Nobody had slept. The phones rang constantly with reporters asking questions nobody could answer. "I can't believe she's gone," whispered Jennifer, Ashley's closest friend at work. "We just talked yesterday morning. She was so excited about that young couple who wanted to put in an offer. The office manager canceled all showings for the week. Nobody felt safe working alone anymore." The bright, cheerful office that Ashley had loved now felt hollow and strange. By evening, news vans lined the street outside the model home. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, speaking in hushed voices and glancing nervously at their surroundings. This kind of thing didn't happen in West Des Moines. This was supposed to be a safe place to raise children. Ashley's parents arrived from Cedar Rapids, their faces pale with shock and exhaustion. They'd driven the same route Ashley traveled every day to work, trying to understand how their daughter's world had suddenly ended. "She was going to call us tonight," her mother said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She always called on Sunday evenings to tell us about her week." That night, hundreds of people gathered in the park near Ashley's apartment. They carried candles and flowers, sharing memories of her kindness and warmth. Jennifer stood at the center of the circle, trying to find words that didn't exist. Ashley saw the good in everyone. She began, her voice shaking. She believed in helping people find their perfect home, their safe place. She deserved to feel safe too. As the candles flickered in the darkness, Mrs. Henderson approached Ashley's parents. She was the one who'd found their daughter, and she couldn't stop shaking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I wish I'd gotten there sooner." Ashley's mother took her hands. "You did everything you could. Thank you for being there for her." Monday morning brought a fresh wave of activity to the crime scene. Detective Martinez returned with a full forensics team, ready to examine every inch of the model home. The yellow tape fluttered in the spring breeze as neighbors watched from their yards. "What do we know so far?" asked Detective Rodriguez, Martinez's new partner. 27-year-old real estate agent, shot once in the head around 4:30 yesterday afternoon, Martinez replied, consulting his notes. "No signs of robbery, sexual assault, or struggle." Her purse was untouched, jewelry still on. The forensics team photographed everything. Blood spatter patterns on the walls. Ashley's position when she fell. The guest book, with signatures from 5 families who'd toured the house earlier. "Killer probably walked right up to her," the forensics specialist observed. "Close-range shot. Either she knew him or he surprised her somehow." Martinez interviewed the families who'd signed the guest book. The young couple from that morning remembered Ashley being friendly and helpful. A family with 2 small children recalled leaving around noon. An elderly man had stopped by briefly around 2 o'clock. "She seemed perfectly normal," each witness reported. "Happy, professional, no signs of distress." The media, attention intensified daily. "Real estate agent murdered at open house," screamed newspaper headlines. Local television stations ran Ashley's smiling photo alongside images of the crime scene. Phone tips poured into the police station. Neighbors reported suspicious vehicles. Ex-boyfriends were questioned and cleared. Random strangers called with theories and accusations. But after 2 weeks of intensive investigation, Detective Martinez had to admit they were stuck. No solid suspects. No clear motive. No witnesses who'd seen anything useful. At the press conference, Martinez faced a room full of frustrated reporters and worried residents. "We're following every lead," he assured them. "Someone knows something about who killed Ashley Oakland, and we won't stop until we find them." But privately, he wondered if they ever would. By May, the initial shock had hardened into fear. For sale signs appeared in yards throughout West Des Moines. As families decided they no longer felt safe, real estate agents stopped working alone, and open houses became group events with multiple staff members present. Ashley's murder dominated every conversation. At coffee shops and school pickup lines, residents shared theories and suspicions. Was it a stranger passing through town? Someone with a grudge against real estate agents? A random psychopath who could strike again? The police received hundreds of tips, each requiring investigation and follow-up. A man acting strangely at the grocery store. A neighbor who'd been asking too many questions about Ashley. A coworker who'd seemed jealous of her success. "We're checking everything," Detective Martinez told Ashley's parents during one of their weekly meetings. "I know it's frustrating, but we can't afford to miss anything." Ashley's father, a quiet man who'd worked construction his whole life, struggled with the helplessness. "There has to be something. People don't just vanish after committing murder. Someone saw something, knows something." Her mother coped by staying busy. She organized fundraisers for victims' rights organizations and spoke at community meetings about safety. But late at night, she lay awake wondering if Ashley had been afraid in those final moments. Jennifer tried to keep Ashley's clients happy, handling the listings her friend had been working on. But every time she walked into an empty house for a showing, she imagined Ashley's final moments. Had she known her killer? Had she tried to run? The case began appearing on true crime television shows. America's Most Wanted featured Ashley's story, leading to another wave of tips and false leads. Each dead end felt like losing her all over again. As summer faded into fall, the investigation quietly slowed. New cases demanded attention. The media moved on to other stories. But Ashley's family refused to give up hope, even as their hearts broke a little more each day. April 8, 2012 dawned gray and drizzly. Exactly 1 year since Ashley's murder, and still no arrests. Her family gathered at the cemetery where she'd been laid to rest, surrounded by friends and co-workers who remembered her bright smile and generous heart. "A year ago, we lost Ashley," her father said, his voice steady despite his tears. "Someone out there knows what happened to our daughter, and we believe that someday they'll find the courage to speak up." Detective Martinez attended the memorial service, standing quietly at the back of the crowd. The case file sat on his desk, now officially designated as cold. New detectives had taken over the active investigations, leaving him to pursue Ashley's killer in his spare time. The police department held a press conference that afternoon, announcing a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Ashley's photo appeared on billboards throughout central Iowa. "Who killed Ashley Oakland?" the signs asked in bold letters, but as the months passed, the calls slowed to a trickle. The billboard company quietly removed the signs when the contract expired. Ashley's case file was boxed up and moved to the cold case storage room, joining hundreds of other unsolved mysteries. Jennifer kept Ashley's business cards in her desk drawer, unable to throw them away. Sometimes she'd take one out and trace Ashley's name with her finger, remembering their conversations and shared dreams. Ashley's parents established a memorial scholarship at the local community college for students studying real estate. Ashley believed in helping people find their homes, her mother explained at the dedication ceremony. "This way, she can keep helping even though she's gone." The scholarship recipients were announced each spring on the anniversary of Ashley's death. Young people with bright futures and Ashley's same determination to succeed. It provided some comfort, but it couldn't fill the Ashley-shaped hole in her family's hearts. By Christmas 2012, most people had stopped talking about the murder. Life moved on, as it always does. But Ashley's killer was still out there, and her family would never stop searching for answers. 3 years passed, then 5, then 10. Ashley's friends got married, had children, built careers. They named daughters after her and told stories about her kindness. But the sharp edge of grief gradually softened into a permanent, manageable sadness. Ashley's parents aged visibly during those years. Her father's hair turned completely gray. Her mother developed worry lines around her eyes that never went away. They attended every graduation ceremony for scholarship recipients, seeing glimpses of what Ashley might have become. Detective Martinez retired in 2018, but he kept Ashley's case file in his personal office at home. Sometimes late at night, he'd spread the photographs and witness statements across his desk, looking for connections he'd missed. His wife would find him there in the morning, asleep, over the paperwork, still searching. "You have to let it go, Carlos," she'd say gently. "You did everything you could." But Martinez couldn't let go. Ashley's case had haunted him throughout his career, representing every victim who deserved justice but never received it. Every unsolved murder that kept families wondering and waiting. Technology advanced during those years. DNA testing became more sophisticated. Digital forensics improved. Cold case units formed in police departments across the country, dedicated to solving old mysteries with new tools. In 2019, Martinez heard about other cold cases being solved through advances in ballistics databases. Bullets from decades-old crimes were being matched to weapons used in more recent cases. He thought about Ashley's case file, sitting in storage, and wondered if the answers were buried somewhere in data he didn't have access to. Ashley's mother continued organizing memorial events each April. Fewer people attended as the years passed, but the core group remained loyal. Jennifer, now married with 2 children, brought her daughter to learn about the kind of woman Ashley had been. "She would have been an amazing aunt," Jennifer told the little girl. "She would have spoiled you rotten." The model home where Ashley died was sold and resold. New families moved in, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred there. Life continued, as it must, but Ashley's memory lived on in scholarships and stories, and the unwavering determination of those who loved her. By 2020, advances in forensic technology were revolutionizing cold case investigations across the country. DNA databases expanded exponentially. Digital reconstruction techniques could analyze evidence with unprecedented precision. Most importantly for Ashley's case, ballistics databases had grown into massive, interconnected systems that could match bullets and weapons across state lines in decades. Detective Sarah Chen joined the West Des Moines Police Department's newly formed cold case unit in early 2023. Fresh out of training in digital forensics, she requested Ashley's file as her first major investigation. "Why this one?" asked her supervisor, Lieutenant Williams. "Because she deserves justice," Chen replied simply, "and because I think we can solve it now." Chen spent weeks digitizing every piece of evidence from Ashley's case. Crime scene photographs, witness statements, forensic reports, and most crucially, the bullet fragments recovered from the scene. The original investigators had done excellent work, but they lacked the technological tools now available. The breakthrough came when Chen uploaded the ballistics data to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. Within hours, the system generated a possible match. A bullet from Ashley's crime scene shared unique characteristics with evidence from a domestic violence case in Nebraska from 2018. The gun that killed Ashley was used again 7 years later, Chen explained to Lieutenant Williams, and we have a suspect from that Nebraska case. Bobby Jack Betts had been arrested in 2018 for threatening his girlfriend with a handgun. He'd pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and served 6 months in county jail. But the weapon was never recovered, and Betts claimed he'd sold it years earlier. Chen began building a timeline of Betts's life. In 2011, he'd lived just 30 minutes from West Des Moines and worked construction jobs throughout central Iowa. His employment records showed he'd been laid off from a project just 2 days before Ashley's murder. He knew the area, Chen told her partner, Detective Reynolds. He was unemployed and angry, and we know he had the murder weapon. But knowing and proving were different things. They needed more evidence to build a case that would survive in court. Detective Chen approached the investigation systematically, using techniques that hadn't existed when Ashley was murdered. She obtained warrants for Betts's cell phone records from 2011, bank statements, and employment history. Digital forensics revealed a pattern of behavior that painted a disturbing picture. On April 8, 2011, Betts' cell phone had pinged towers near the model home development. His bank records showed no transactions that day, meaning he had no alibi for the time of Ashley's murder. Most damning, his internet search history from the days before showed he'd looked up open house listings in West Des Moines. He was hunting, Chen told the prosecutor's office. Ashley wasn't a random target. He specifically sought out a vulnerable woman working alone. The team examined Betts's background more thoroughly. He had a history of controlling behavior toward women, job instability, and barely contained rage. Coworkers from 2011 remembered him as someone who blamed others for his failures and harbored deep resentments. In Nebraska, Betts' former girlfriend agreed to speak with investigators. She described a man who became violent when he felt disrespected or ignored. He'd often talked about teaching people lessons and had a particular hatred for successful women. He said they thought they were better than him, she recalled. He especially hated this one real estate agent who'd shown him a house he couldn't afford, made him feel stupid, he said. Chen obtained records from real estate offices throughout central Iowa. In March 2011, just weeks before Ashley's murder, Bobby Jack Betts had attended an open house in Ankeny. The agent who'd shown him the property remembered him as argumentative and inappropriate. He asked personal questions, made comments about me working alone, she told Chen. I was relieved when he left. There was something off about him. The case was building, but prosecutors wanted more. They needed evidence that would convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. Chen knew they were close, but close wasn't enough for Ashley's family, who had waited 12 years for answers. Chen worked 18-hour days, chasing every lead and connection. Ashley deserved nothing less than their absolute best effort. Prosecutor Lisa Morgan reviewed Chen's case file with growing confidence. The ballistics evidence was solid. The cell phone data placed Betts at the scene. His internet searches showed premeditation. His history with women revealed a pattern of violence and control. We can make this case, Morgan told the investigative team, but we need to be perfect. No mistakes, no gaps he can slip through. Morgan had built her career prosecuting violent crimes against women. She understood the weight of representing victims who couldn't speak for themselves. Ashley's case would require her full attention and expertise. Chen continued gathering evidence through the fall of 2023. She interviewed everyone who'd known Betts in 2011, looking for additional witnesses or connections to Ashley. She consulted with forensic psychologists about his behavioral patterns and motivations. The break came in December, when Chen located Betts's former roommate from 2011. The man, now living in Colorado, remembered Bobby coming home around dinner time on April 8, agitated and talking about rich people who got what they deserved. He was washing his hands obsessively, the roommate recalled. Said he'd been working on his car, but his car was clean. I thought it was weird, but Bobby was always weird. They'd assembled a comprehensive case that traced Bobby Jack Betts's movements, motivations, and means. The ballistics evidence tied him conclusively to Ashley's murder weapon. Morgan called Ashley's parents to prepare them for what was coming. We're going to arrest him, she told them gently. These years, we finally have enough evidence. Ashley's mother broke down, sobbing. Her father held her close, tears streaming down his own cheeks. They'd never stopped believing this day would come, but the reality felt overwhelming. Will he be convicted? Ashley's father asked. I can't promise you anything, Morgan replied, but we have a strong case, and we're going to fight for Ashley with everything we have. The arrest warrant was signed on April 5, 2024. 13 years and 3 days after Ashley's murder, justice was finally within reach. Bobby Jack Betts was living in a rundown apartment complex in Omaha When detectives arrived at dawn on April 8, 2024, exactly 13 years after Ashley's murder, the date was chosen deliberately, both for its symbolic significance and because it was the anniversary when media attention would be highest. Detective Chen knocked on the door at 6 a.m., flanked by local police officers and federal marshals. Betts answered in boxer shorts and a stained t-shirt, his hair disheveled from sleep. He looked older than his 46 years, worn down by whatever demons he'd been carrying. "Bobby Jack Betts?" Chen said, showing her badge. "I'm Detective Chen with West Des Moines Police. You're under arrest for the murder of Ashley Oakland." Betts's face went pale. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a cigarette from the table beside the door. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You have the right to remain silent," Chen continued, handcuffing him while the Miranda rights echoed through the shabby hallway. Neighbors peered out from cracked doors, curious about the commotion. During the drive back to Iowa, Betts remained silent in the back seat of the police cruiser. Chen watched him in the rearview mirror, seeing a man who'd lived with guilt for 13 years finally confronting his crimes. At the police station, Betts was processed and booked into the county jail. His mugshot showed hollow eyes and a face marked by years of substance abuse and stress. This was the man who'd taken Ashley's life, stolen her future, and left her family shattered. Ashley's parents received the call at 7:30 a.m. They'd been waiting by the phone all morning, knowing this day might come but hardly daring to hope. "We got him," Detective Chen said simply. "Bobby Jack Betts is in custody for Ashley's murder." Ashley's mother collapsed into her husband's arms, 13 years of grief and hope, finally finding release. They'd never stopped believing their daughter would receive justice. Today, that belief was finally vindicated. The arrest made national news. Ashley's story, which had faded from public memory, suddenly returned to headlines across the country. The news of Bobby Jack Betts' arrest spread through West Des Moines like wildfire. By noon, reporters had gathered outside the police station and Ashley's childhood home. The story that had captivated the community 13 years earlier was front-page news again. "Arrest made in Ashley Oakland murder," read the banner headline in the Des Moines Register. Local television stations interrupted regular programming with breaking news alerts. Social media buzzed with reactions from residents who remembered the fear that had gripped their community in 2011. Police Chief Roberts held a press conference at 2 o'clock, flanked by Detective Chen and Prosecutor Morgan. The room was packed with reporters and community members who'd followed the case for over a decade. "Today marks a significant step toward justice for Ashley Oakland and her family," Chief Roberts began. "Thanks to advances in technology and the dedicated work of our cold case unit, we have arrested Bobby Jack Betts for Ashley's murder." The chief outlined the evidence, without revealing details that might compromise the upcoming trial. Ballistics evidence, digital forensics, witness statements, a methodical investigation that had finally connected all the pieces. Jennifer attended the press conference with her teenage daughter. They sat in the back row, holding hands and remembering Ashley together. "Your Aunt Ashley would be so proud," Jennifer whispered. "Justice is finally coming." Ashley's parents declined to speak with reporters that day. They released a written statement through their attorney. "We are grateful to Detective Chen, Prosecutor Morgan, and everyone who never gave up on finding Ashley's killer. While nothing can bring our daughter back, we hope this arrest brings some measure of justice and closure." The model home where Ashley was killed had been sold twice since 2011. The current owners, a young family with small children, learned about the history of their house from news reports. They stood in their living room, imagining the violence that had occurred there, and decided to install a memorial plaque in Ashley's honor. That evening, spontaneous vigils formed throughout the city. People lit candles and shared memories of Ashley, celebrating the arrest while mourning all the years she'd missed. Bobby Jack Betts made his first court appearance on April 10th, flanked by a public defender who'd been assigned to his case just hours earlier. He shuffled into the courtroom wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. The man who'd once inspired fear now looked small and defeated. Judge Patricia Williams presided over the hearing with calm authority. She'd handled hundreds of murder cases during her career, but Ashley Oakland's story held special significance for her community. "Mr. Betts," Judge Williams said, "you are charged with first-degree murder in the death of Ashley Oakland on April 8, 2011. How do you plead?" Betts leaned toward his attorney for a whispered conversation. The courtroom held its breath. Ashley's parents sat in the front row, clutching each other's hands and staring at the man accused of destroying their lives. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Betts said quietly. The plea was expected, but it still sent ripples through the packed courtroom. This case would go to trial, meaning Ashley's family would have to endure months more of legal proceedings and painful testimony. Prosecutor Morgan requested that Betts be held without bond, citing the severity of the crime and his flight risk. The defense argued for reasonable bail, claiming their client had lived peacefully in Nebraska for years without incident. Judge Williams sided with the prosecution. Given the nature of these charges and the length of time this case has been pending, the defendant will be held without bond pending trial. Over the following months, both sides prepared their cases. Morgan's team organized evidence, interviewed witnesses, and consulted with forensic experts. The defense hired private investigators and ballistics specialists, searching for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Pre-trial motions flew back and forth. The defense tried to suppress the ballistics evidence, arguing it was too circumstantial. They challenged the search warrants used to obtain Betts's cell phone records. They requested a change of venue, claiming their client couldn't receive a fair trial in Des Moines. Judge Williams denied most of the defense motions. The evidence would be heard. The trial would stay local. Ashley would finally have her day in court. While legal proceedings moved slowly through the courts, Ashley's friends and family channeled their emotions into creating something beautiful in her memory. Jennifer organized a community effort to build a memorial garden in the park where the first candlelight vigil had been held. Ashley loved beautiful spaces. Jennifer explained to the city council when requesting permission for the project. She helped families find their perfect homes. This garden will be a perfect place for our community to remember her. Donations poured in from across central Iowa. Local businesses contributed materials and labor. Ashley's former colleagues from the real estate office worked alongside neighbors and strangers who'd been touched by her story. The garden featured Ashley's favorite flowers: sunflowers, daisies, and purple irises. A bench made from Iowa limestone bore a simple inscription: Ashley Oakland. She helped others find home. Pathways wound through the planted beds, creating quiet spaces for reflection and remembrance. Ashley's parents attended the dedication ceremony on a warm Saturday in September. Nearly 200 people gathered to celebrate their daughter's memory and the community that had never forgotten her. 13 years ago, we lost Ashley to senseless violence, her father said, addressing the crowd. But we never lost hope that justice would come. This garden represents the love that has sustained us through the darkest days. Children played on nearby swings while adults walked the memorial paths. Some visitors left flowers or handwritten notes. Others simply sat on Ashley's bench, remembering a young woman whose life had been cut too short. Detective Chen attended the ceremony with her family. Solving Ashley's case had become deeply personal for her, and seeing the community's continued love and support reinforced why her work mattered. Jennifer's teenage daughter helped plant the final sunflower seeds. "These will bloom every summer," she told Ashley's mother, "just like her memory blooms in all of us." As autumn approached and the trial date grew closer, the memorial garden provided a peaceful refuge for those preparing to face the difficult testimony ahead. January 15, 2025, dawned cold and clear. After nearly 14 years, Ashley Oakland's murder case finally went to trial. The courthouse buzzed with activity as reporters, spectators, and potential jurors filled the building. Jury selection had taken 3 days. 12 citizens of Polk County would decide Bobby Jack Betts' fate. The defense had tried to exclude anyone who remembered Ashley's case from the news, but in a community where her story had become part of local history, that proved nearly impossible. Prosecutor Morgan rose for her opening statement, wearing a navy blue suit that conveyed both professionalism and solemnity. She looked directly at the jurors as she began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a young woman who went to work on a beautiful spring day and never came home. Ashley Oakland was 27 years old. She was helping families find their dreams when the defendant, Bobby Jack Betts, walked into that model home and took her life." Morgan outlined the evidence methodically. The ballistics match that connected Betts's gun to Ashley's murder, his cell phone records placing him at the scene, his internet searches revealing premeditation, his history of violence toward women. This was not a random crime, Morgan emphasized. The defendant targeted Ashley because she represented everything he resented: success, kindness, the American dream he couldn't achieve for himself. Defense attorney Michael Brooks rose for his opening statement with obvious reluctance. He'd taken this case knowing it would be nearly impossible to win, but everyone deserved legal representation. "The prosecution wants you to believe they've solved a 13-year-old murder with circumstantial evidence and speculation," Brooks told the jury. "But cell phone pings and ballistics databases don't tell the whole story. The real killer of Ashley Oakland has never been found." Brooks argued that his client was being scapegoated for a crime that remained unsolved. The evidence, he claimed, was too weak to convict anyone, let alone send a man to prison for life. Ashley's parents sat in the front row throughout the opening statements, holding hands and trying to remain strong. After so many years of waiting, the search for truth was finally beginning. Prosecutor Morgan's case unfolded methodically over 2 weeks. She called Detective Chen to the stand first, allowing the jury to understand how advances in technology had cracked a case that seemed hopeless for over a decade. The breakthrough came when I uploaded the ballistics evidence to the national database, Chen explained. Within hours, we had a match to Bobby Jack Betts' weapon from a 2018 domestic violence case in Nebraska. Morgan introduced crime scene photographs, 911 recordings, and medical examiner reports. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of Ashley's final moments, alone in an empty house, confronted by a stranger with a gun. The forensic testimony was particularly powerful. A ballistics expert explained how the unique markings on bullets could identify specific weapons with scientific certainty. The bullet that killed Ashley had come from Betts' .38 caliber revolver. The probability of these markings occurring on bullets fired from different weapons is less than 1 in a billion, the expert testified. Morgan called Betts' former roommate from Colorado, who described his strange behavior on April 8, 2011, the obsessive hand-washing, his comments about rich people getting what they deserved, his agitation, despite claiming he'd spent the day working on his car. Cell phone records provided a digital trail of Betts' movements. His phone had pinged towers near the model home development at 4:23 p.m. on April 8, just minutes before Ashley was found. The defendant was there, Morgan told the jury. His phone proves it. His gun proves it. His own words prove it. The prosecution's most emotional witness was Ashley's mother. She took the stand wearing a simple black dress, Ashley's silver locket around her neck. Ashley called me every Sunday evening, she testified, her voice breaking. She would tell me about her week, her clients, her hopes for the future. I waited by the phone that Sunday, but the call never came. It never came. Defense attorney Brooks objected frequently, trying to exclude evidence or limit testimony, but the prosecution's case was building into an overwhelming mountain of proof that Bobby Jack Betts had murdered Ashley Oakland. Defense attorney Brooks faced an almost impossible task. The evidence against his client was substantial and scientific. His only hope was to raise reasonable doubt about the prosecution's narrative, even if he couldn't offer an alternative explanation for Ashley's murder. Brooks challenged the ballistics evidence first, calling his own expert witness who questioned the reliability of bullet comparison techniques. The defense expert argued that microscopic markings could be affected by years in evidence storage or damage during initial testing. Ballistics analysis is not as precise as fingerprints or DNA, the defense expert testified. There's always a margin for error, especially with evidence that's over a decade old. The cross-examination of Detective Chen focused on the length of time between the murder and the arrest. Brooks suggested that memories had become unreliable, evidence had deteriorated, and witnesses might be confusing details from different time periods. Isn't it convenient, Brooks asked Chen, that after 13 years of no progress, you suddenly solve this case with technology that didn't exist in 2011? Brooks attacked the cell phone evidence, arguing that tower pings could be unreliable and that Betts might have been anywhere within a several-mile radius of the murder scene. He suggested his client could have been at a gas station, restaurant, or shopping center in the area for innocent reasons. The defense called character witnesses for Betts, including his sister and a former employer who described him as quiet and hardworking. They painted a picture of a man struggling with unemployment and depression, not someone capable of cold-blooded murder. Bobby has his problems, his sister testified, but he's not violent. He's never hurt anyone in his life. However, the defense's strategy crumbled during cross-examination when prosecutor Morgan introduced Betts' Nebraska arrest for threatening his girlfriend with a gun. The non-violent narrative fell apart when confronted with documented evidence of his threatening behavior. Brooks' closing argument was passionate but hollow. He asked the jury to ignore the rush to judgment and demand absolute proof of his client's guilt. But 13 years of careful investigation had provided exactly that proof. The defense had done its job, but the truth was unavoidable. Bobby Jack Betts had killed Ashley Oakland. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Word spread quickly through West Des Moines, and the courthouse filled with spectators who'd followed Ashley's case for 14 years. Ashley's parents sat in their usual seats in the front row, holding hands so tightly their knuckles had turned white. Jennifer sat beside them with her daughter, all of them trying to prepare for whatever came next. Judge Williams called the court to order as Bobby Jack Betts was brought in wearing his orange jumpsuit. He looked older than when the trial began, worn down by weeks of testimony that had systematically destroyed any hope of acquittal. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Williams asked. The foreman, a retired teacher named Margaret Collins, stood with the verdict form in her shaking hands. Yes, Your Honor, we have. The courtroom fell completely silent. 14 years of investigation, grief, and hope had led to this single moment. On the charge of first-degree murder, in the death of Ashley Oakland, how do you find? Margaret Collins looked directly at Ashley's parents before reading the verdict. We find the defendant, Bobby Jack Betts, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Ashley's mother collapsed, sobbing into her husband's arms. Jennifer wept openly while her daughter held her close. Spectators applauded until Judge Williams restored order. Bobby Jack Betts showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. His brief moment of defiance in the model home had cost him his freedom for the rest of his life. Outside the courthouse, Prosecutor Morgan addressed the media surrounded by Ashley's family and the investigators who'd never given up. Today, justice was finally served for Ashley Oakland, Morgan said. While we cannot bring her back, we can ensure that her killer will never harm another innocent person. Detective Chen stood beside the prosecutor, thinking about all the late nights and false leads that had finally brought them to this moment. Ashley deserved justice, she said simply. Today, she got it. The guilty verdict made national headlines, bringing closure to a case that had haunted a community for over a decade. 6 weeks later, Bobby Jack Betts returned to the same courtroom for his sentencing hearing. The guilty verdict had sealed his fate, life in prison without the possibility of parole, but Iowa law required a formal sentencing proceeding where victims' families could make impact statements. Ashley's mother had spent days preparing her statement, trying to find words that could express 14 years of grief, anger, and loss. She walked slowly to the podium, carrying a photograph of Ashley taken just weeks before her death. My daughter Ashley was 27 years old when you took her life, she began, her voice steady but filled with pain. She will never walk down the aisle. She will never hold her own children. She will never call me on Sunday nights to tell me about her week. She described Ashley's dreams and plans, her kindness toward others, her excitement about her career in real estate. You didn't just kill Ashley that day. You killed our grandchildren who will never be born. You killed family gatherings that will always have an empty chair. You killed pieces of everyone who loved her. Ashley's father spoke next, his construction worker's hands trembling as he held his notes. For 14 years, we wondered who killed our daughter and why. Now we know it was you, and the why doesn't matter. There is no excuse for what you did. Jennifer delivered the final impact statement, representing Ashley's friends and colleagues who'd mourned her loss. Ashley saw the good in everyone, she said. She would have tried to help you if you'd asked. Instead, you chose violence. You chose to destroy a light that was making the world brighter. Judge Williams listened to each statement with careful attention before addressing Betts directly. Mr. Betts, you have been convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Ashley Oakland. The jury has found that you deliberately and with premeditation took the life of an innocent young woman who was simply doing her job. Judge Williams sentenced Betts to life in prison without parole, plus additional time for weapons charges. He would die behind bars, never again free to hurt anyone. Ashley's parents embraced outside the courthouse, finally able to close this chapter of their lives and focus on preserving their daughter's memory. In the weeks following Bobby Jack Betts' sentencing, West Des Moines began to breathe easier. The fear that had lingered for 14 years finally lifted. Parents allowed their teenage daughters to work part-time jobs again. Real estate agents returned to conducting solo open houses. The community that had been forever changed by Ashley's murder slowly started to heal. Ashley's parents visited her grave on a warm April morning, carrying fresh sunflowers from the memorial garden. They knelt beside her headstone, finally able to tell her that her killer had been brought to justice. We did it, sweetheart, her mother whispered. We never gave up on you. Detective Chen received a commendation for her work on the case, but the real reward was seeing Ashley's family find peace. Cold cases consumed investigators' hearts and minds in ways that ordinary people couldn't understand. Solving Ashley's murder had validated Chen's entire career. Jennifer organized one final memorial service at the model home where Ashley had died. The current owners, moved by Ashley's story, had agreed to install a small plaque by the front door, in memory of Ashley Oakland, who helped others find home. The service was simple but meaningful. Ashley's favorite songs played softly, while friends and family shared their happiest memories of her. Stories about her terrible cooking, her infectious laugh, her ability to remember everyone's birthday. Ashley would want us to remember the joy, not just the sorrow, Jennifer told the gathering. She believed in new beginnings, fresh starts, and the possibility of happiness. That's how we should honor her memory. Ashley's parents announced that the Memorial Scholarship Fund had grown large enough to support 2 students each year instead of 1. Ashley's legacy would live on through young people pursuing their dreams in real estate, just as she had. As the sun set over the neighborhood where Ashley's life had ended, her family and friends walked together toward their cars. The long journey toward justice was finally complete, but the journey of remembrance would continue forever. The first summer after Bobby Jack Betts's conviction brought a sense of renewal to West Des Moines. The memorial garden bloomed with Ashley's favorite flowers, creating a peaceful space where people could remember her life rather than focus on her death. Ashley's former high school organized a scholarship program in her name, recognizing students who showed her same combination of academic achievement and kindness toward others. The first recipient was a young woman who planned to study business and real estate, following in Ashley's footsteps. Ashley represented the best of our community, the principal said at the awards ceremony. She worked hard, treated people with respect, and never forgot where she came from. These scholarship recipients embody those same values. Jennifer had written a book about Ashley's life and the long journey toward justice. All proceeds went to victim advocacy organizations that helped families navigate the criminal justice system. She spoke at book signings and community events, keeping Ashley's memory alive while helping others find strength in their darkest moments. Ashley's story doesn't end with her death or even with her killer's conviction, Jennifer would tell audiences. It continues every time someone chooses kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, love over fear. The model home development had grown into a thriving neighborhood filled with young families. Children played in yards where police tape had once fluttered. The street where Ashley died now echoed with laughter instead of sirens. A community garden was planted next to Ashley's memorial garden, where neighbors worked together to grow vegetables for the local food bank. Ashley had believed in helping others, and the garden provided a way for residents to honor that belief through service. Detective Chen visited the memorial garden regularly, especially on difficult days when other cold cases seemed impossible to solve. Ashley's story reminded her that justice was always possible, even after years of frustration and dead ends. The annual memorial service had evolved into a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. Speakers shared stories about Ashley's humor, her loyalty, her dreams for the future. The emphasis had shifted from loss to love, from tragedy to triumph. 5 months after the trial ended, Ashley's parents walked hand in hand through downtown West Des Moines on a crisp autumn evening. The trees were turning gold and red, painting the familiar streets with warm colors that reminded them of Ashley's vibrant spirit. They paused outside the real estate office where Ashley had worked, now occupied by a children's clothing store. A small plaque by the door read, "In memory of Ashley Oakland, beloved daughter and friend, who made our community brighter." She would have loved seeing children's clothes in her old workplace, Ashley's mother said with a gentle smile. She always talked about having kids someday. They continued their walk to the memorial garden, where evening shadows were beginning to lengthen. A young mother sat on Ashley's bench, reading a book while her toddler played in the nearby grass. Life continued. New generations grew up, but Ashley's memory remained. Detective Chen had visited earlier that day, leaving a small bouquet of daisies by the memorial stone. She'd been promoted to lead the cold case unit, inspired by Ashley's case to help other families find the answers they deserved. Prosecutor Morgan had moved on to private practice, but she still kept Ashley's photograph on her office wall. It reminded her why she'd chosen law as her profession, to speak for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Bobby Jack Betts began his life sentence at the Iowa State Penitentiary, his name eventually forgotten by everyone except those whose lives he'd destroyed. Ashley's name, however, would be remembered through scholarships, memorial gardens, and the countless lives she'd touched. As darkness fell over the city, Ashley's parents made their way home to the house where their daughter had grown up. They'd learned to live with grief, to find joy in memories, and to believe that love truly can outlast even the longest winter. Ashley Oakland's story had ended with justice served and a community healed, but her legacy of kindness, determination, and hope would continue forever in the hearts of those who loved her. Love remains.